Welcome to Plugged In Australia, episode 52 for Monday the 11th of May 2026. And today we've got a packed show. Nio's Firefly City EV is getting closer to Australia. Leapmotor is showing the factory strategy behind its low price push. And the huge Leapmotor D19 could become a very interesting electric or range extender family SUV for our market. Toyota is planning a fully electric Yaris. New South Wales is putting more support behind charging, fleets and EV training. Zeekr is explaining why plug-in hybrids are now part of its Australian plan. MG is preparing software upgrades for the IM5 and IM6 owners. The MG4 has been updated and cut in price. Genesis has given the GV60 a much-needed price reset. And BMW has just built its 2-millionth electric vehicle. Without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, first up, Nio's Firefly is looking more and more like one of the most interesting small EVs heading towards Australia. This is the compact electric hatch from Nio's Firefly sub-brand, and the basic idea is pretty straightforward. A small, premium city EV with cute styling, a high-tech cabin and enough practicality to be more than just a short distance runabout. Reports indicate that launch details are firming for Australia in 2026, and that matters because Firefly could become the opening act for Nio in this market. On paper, Firefly sits in a really interesting spot. It is roughly 4 metres long, so we're talking about something in the ballpark of a Mini Cooper-sized hatch, not a big family SUV. However, the official global specification points to some clever packaging. It has a 92-litre frunk, which is pretty big for a small car. The rear boot is listed at 404 litres, and with the second row folded, total storage space is quoted at up to 1,253 litres. That is the sort of practicality that could make it work as a second family car, a commuter, or a city car that still needs to do the school run, shopping and weekend errands. The Global Firefly uses a battery electric platform with rear-wheel drive, a rear multi-link suspension layout, and a very tight turning circle. Official information lists the turning circle at 9.4 metres or a 4.7 metre turning radius. For dense suburbs, shopping centre car parks and narrow inner city streets, it's going to be genuinely useful. Range is listed at up to 330 kilometres on the WLTP cycle. That's not huge. However, for a small urban EV, it is perfectly workable, as long as the price is right. Charging is listed at up to 100 kilowatts DC with a 10 to 80% fast charge in around 29 minutes. AC charging is listed at 7 kilowatts single phase or 11 kilowatts 3-phase, depending on market and spec. And vehicle to load is also part of the global specification. Inside, Firefly is more upmarket than a bare bones budget hatch. There is a 6-inch digital instrument display, a 13.2-inch central screen, and a 14-speaker sound system with Dolby Atmos support. It also has a large driver assistance suite with more than 20 sensors and cameras, active lane change assistance, parking assistance, and up to 9 airbags, which will depend on the market. Now, the big Australian question is the price. This is where Firefly could either become very compelling or a bit tricky. If it lands at a sharp price, it could be a proper alternative to cars like the BYD Dolphin, the MG4 Urban, the GWM Aura, or even the BYD Atto 1. But if it lands too far into the premium small car space, it risks becoming a niche product. That is the hard truth with small premium EVs. A city car can be brilliant. However, Australians are often reluctant to pay SUV money for a compact hatch. Firefly has to make the value obvious. The other question is going to be support. Nio is a major EV player globally, and the company has built its name around technology, battery swapping, and premium electric cars. But Australia is a tough market. We need to know who will sell it, who will service it, what the warranty looks like, what the parts supply looks like, and whether Nio's battery swap story has any real local relevance at launch. Because without battery swap infrastructure, Firefly has to stand on its normal EV strengths: price, range, charging, practicality, warranty, and dealer support. Still, this is exactly the kind of car Australia needs more of. Not every EV has to be a 2.5-tonne SUV. A small, efficient, well-packaged electric hatch could be a really useful option for households that already have a larger family car, or for buyers who just want a low running cost commuter. So, Firefly is one to watch closely. We will be doing that indeed. The specs look sensible. The package looks clever. The Australian launch looks just a little bit more likely as we keep going. Now we need the local pricing, warranty, delivery timing, and final specification. Okay, next up is Leapmotor. This story is not just about one car. It's about how a newer Chinese EV brand is trying to take on the giants by controlling more of the expensive stuff itself. Some Australian journalists have been taking a look inside Leapmotor's Chinese production operations, and the big theme is vertical integration. So in plain English, Leapmotor wants to do as much as possible in-house. Battery packs, battery management systems, electric drive units, motor controllers, software, production analytics, and energy storage systems. That matters because batteries and drive systems are the most expensive and strategically important parts of an EV. If you can control these systems yourself, you can potentially lower costs, move faster, and avoid being totally dependent on external suppliers. Now, Leapmotor is already in Australia. We have the C10, the C10 E-Rev range extender, and the B10 SUV, which recently arrived with some aggressive pricing. The brand is also backed internationally through the Stellantis joint venture, with Stellantis investing around 1.5 billion euros into Leapmotor back in 2023. That gives Leapmotor two things it really needs: Chinese manufacturing scale and a global partner that knows how to distribute vehicles outside of China. At the factory level, the numbers are big. Leapmotor says it delivered more than 613,000 vehicles globally in 2025. Its Huzhou battery facility has 6 production lines and annual capacity of around 360,000 units, expandable to 720,000. Its Wuyu site is planned to have capacity for up to 1.72 million battery packs. Leapmotor has also claimed up to 90% self-research and manufacturing depth across key systems. That's a big claim, but it shows the dedication. This is not a company that wants to simply buy components, bolt them together, and complete on price alone. One of the key technologies is in-cell to chassis, or CTC. This is where the battery pack becomes more structurally integrated into the vehicle. Leapmotor says this can save vertical space, increase usable battery space, weight, improve range, and increase body stiffness. The claim benefits include battery space increasing by 14.5%, vehicle weight dropping by 10%, usable battery capacity rising by 10%, driving range increasing by 15%, and torsional stiffness improving by 25%. Those are manufacturer claims, so real-world outcomes depend on the vehicle, the battery, and the final tune. But again, it shows how Leapmotor is chasing efficiency through engineering, not just discounting. The company's battery roadmap is also worth noting. It has moved from earlier 400-volt systems with slower charging through 800-volt architecture and is talking about future 1,000-volt systems with much faster charging. Some of the roadmap points to 12-minute and even 8-minute fast charging targets in the future. Now we need to be careful here. Factory tours are designed to impress. Every car company wants journalists to walk away thinking the operation is clean, advanced, and full of robots. But even with that in mind, Leapmotor's direction is important for Australia. Why? Because this is how we end up with cheaper EVs. When people ask how brands can suddenly sell an electric SUV for less than some petrol rivals, the answer is not just China is cheap. It is battery supply, platform efficiency, vertical integration, local competition, and scale. Leapmotor is trying to bring all of those things together. The other side is trust. Australian buyers are still learning who Leapmotor is. A low price gets attention. However, long-term reliability, parts supply, software quality, servicing, and resale value are what decide whether the brand really sticks. So this factory story is not just background noise. It explains why Leapmotor can come into Australia with sharp pricing and why established brands are under pressure. But it also sets a challenge for Leapmotor. Prove that the manufacturing story turns into reliable cars, good support, and happy owners over the long term. Alright, staying with Leapmotor, let's talk about the D19. This is a big one, literally. The Leapmotor D19 is a full-size 3-row SUV that will be offered in China as both a full battery electric vehicle and a range extender vehicle. And on paper, it looks like exactly the sort of vehicle that could get Australian families paying attention. The D19 is 5,252mm long, 1,995mm wide, and 1780mm tall, sitting on a 3,110mm wheelbase. That makes it a very large SUV. It is longer than a Kia EV9 and aimed more at the large luxury end of the market than the small or medium family SUV crowd. It can be had with 6 or 7 seats depending on configuration. The cabin uses a 15.6-inch central screen, a 10.2-inch digital instrument cluster, and rear entertainment screens. Higher grades bring comfort features like heated, ventilated, and massaging seats. The range extender version uses a 1.5-litre turbo petrol engine as a generator. The important point here is that the petrol engine is not the main drive source in the way it is in a conventional hybrid. The vehicle is still being driven electrically, while the petrol engine is there to generate electricity when needed. For Australia, that could be very relevant. A large 3-row EV with enough battery range for daily driving, but a petrol generator for long regional trips is something many Australian families would actually understand. It takes away some of the charging anxiety without turning the back into a conventional petrol SUV. The D19 EREV is listed with battery sizes of 63.7 kilowatt hours and 80.3 kilowatt hours, depending on the version. Chinese CLTC electric range is listed at 400 or 500 kilometers, with combined driving range in excess of 1300 kilometers for the range extender version. The full EV versions use larger batteries, including 99.6 and 115 kilowatt-hour packs. CLTC driving range is listed from 620 kilometers to 720 kilometers, respectively. Power is also serious. The range extender version is listed at 300 kilowatts, 520 newton meters. The dual motor battery electric version is listed at 410 kilowatts and 625 newton meters. And then we've got the tri-motor battery electric version, steps that up to 540 kilowatts and 745 newton meters of torque. The 0 to 100 kilometer an hour claims range from about 6 seconds in the EREV to 4.9 seconds for the dual motor EV and sub 4 seconds for the tri-motor version. Charging is another headline. The EREV is listed on an 800 volt architecture, while the battery electric version moves to 1000 volts. The claimed fast charge timing is around 20 minutes for the range extender and around 15 minutes for the full EV, depending on version and battery. Again, those are Chinese market figures and mostly CLTC range figures, so as we always do, we should treat them with a massive grain of salt and definitely not like WLTP numbers. CLTC tends to be much more realistic than WLTP, but even after applying a reality check, the D19 is still a serious piece of hardware. Chinese pricing is where things get a little bit crazy. In China, the D19 starts from the equivalent of mid $40,000 range Australian and tops out at around mid $50,000 Australian before any local conversion reality hits. And now that does not mean it will land here at those prices. It would be great if it did. But we've got Australian compliance, shipping, taxes, local distribution, warranty and dealer margin all to factor in. Realistically, if the D19 comes to Australia, it would not be shocking to see it positioned a little bit higher. Some reporting suggests it could be a $70,000 plus proposition if approved for our market. Even then, that could still make it interesting. A Kia EV9 is expensive. A Hyundai Ioniq 9 is expensive. The Zeekr 9X is expected to sit in premium territory. The Denza B8 is coming as a plug-in hybrid off-roader, so there is clear opening for a large, well-equipped 3-row electric or range extender SUV that does not start deep into six-figure territory. The hard truth is that the D19 is not confirmed for Australia yet. Leapmotor is evaluating it, and even if it gets the green light, we are likely looking at 2027 rather than something that turns up in 26. There are also questions around local tuning. Early overseas drives suggest the D19 is comfortable and smooth, but a large SUV like this needs to be right for fantastic Australian roads. Suspension tune, steering calibration, tyres, driver assistance behaviour, towing appeal and third row usability will all matter significantly. But as a concept, the D19 is one of the more interesting large electrified SUVs on the horizon. It combines big family practicality, serious electric range, and the option of range extender backup. For Australian buyers who want to go electric but still do long distance regional driving, that might be exactly the bridge product they have been waiting for. Alright, next up is Toyota. And Toyota is planning a fully electric Yaris hatchback for the next generation of the model, with overseas timing pointing towards about 2028. Now this is a big shift because the Yaris has historically been Toyota's small petrol and hybrid hatch. In Australia, the current Yaris is hybrid only and starts just under $30,000. It is not a cheap car anymore in the old sense, but it is still one of Toyota's smallest and most efficient models. According to reports, Toyota executives have confirmed that a fully electric version is part of the planning for the next generation Yaris. Toyota is still talking about its multi-pathway approach, which means petrol, hybrid and electric options depending on market regulation and customer demand. That's very Toyota. The company is still not going all in on battery electric cars in the same way other brands are. Instead, Toyota wants to offer different drivetrains in different markets. But the important point here is that even Toyota now sees a fully electric Yaris as something it cannot avoid. For Australia, nothing is confirmed. That is the key point. A European electric Yaris does not automatically mean an Australian electric Yaris. There are a few reasons for that. First, the Yaris EV may be built in Europe, with France being talked about as the likely production source. That can create cost problems for Australia because of shipping distance. Exchange rates and production costs are very different to sourcing a small EV from China, Thailand, or even Japan. Second, Australia is a price-sensitive small car market. If Toyota brings in an electric Yaris and it ends up costing well above 40 grand, it becomes a very difficult sell next to Chinese-built rivals. Third, Toyota Australia currently has a very limited EV lineup. The BZ4X is the brand's only fully electric passenger vehicle on sale here at the moment, with an electric Hilux coming soon. So Toyota is still playing catch-up in the EV space locally. The rivals are already moving. BYD is pushing hard into the low-cost end of the EV market with the Atto 1. MG already has the MG4 Urban. GWM has the Aura. Kia is looking at smaller EVs globally. Volkswagen is working towards small, affordable EVs in Europe. So an electric Yaris would be important, however Toyota needs to get the price and timing right. The Yaris badge still carries a lot of trust. A small Toyota EV with decent range, good efficiency, strong safety, proper dealer support, and a realistic price could do very well in Australia. But if it turns up late and expensive, the market may have already moved on. That is a challenge for Toyota. It still has a massive reputation advantage in Australia, especially with hybrid buyers. However, in small EVs, it no longer gets to define the market. It has to catch up to competitors that are already there. Alright, a bit of a sidestep into infrastructure and policy. New South Wales is putting more weight behind the EV transition with support across charging, fleet electrification, heavy vehicles and workforce training. This is the sort of story that can sound a bit dry, but it's actually really important. EV adoption is not just about getting more cars into showrooms, it's about chargers, grid connections, fleet depots, mechanics, emergency services, and people who know how to work safely around high voltage vehicles. The New South Wales Government's 2026 EV strategy includes a focus on filling regional charging gaps, expanding support for heavy vehicle fleets, and improving workforce training. It also sits alongside the broader transition of more than 8,000 public transport buses to zero-emission technology. There is also support for fleets through New South Wales EV Fleets. The program includes funding options for battery electric vehicles and smart chargers, with an average New South Wales fleet driver estimated to save around $3,100 per year in running costs. For eligible businesses, the Kickstart funding stream is particularly relevant. It opens for the 25-26 financial year and is due to close on the 29th of May 2026. The funding can support the purchase of eligible electric vehicles and smart charging ports, with up to $50,000 per vehicle available in some cases, and support for up to 15 vehicles. Now, that does not mean every business gets the maximum amount. Eligibility, vehicle type, application details, and funding availability all matter. However, for businesses running vans, utes, trucks, taxis, pool cars, or like commercial vehicle fleets, support like this can change the numbers, and that is where fleets matter. Private buyers often focus on sticker price. Fleets look harder at a whole of life cost. You've got fuel, servicing, downtime, depreciation, fringe benefits, charging and operational lift. If an EV can do the job and the depot charging is sorted, the maths can become very strong. New South Wales is also investing in training. That includes TAFE micro skills courses and support for mechanics and emergency service workers. There's also been funding connected to training regional mechanics, because EV servicing capability cannot just exist in the city. This is a real-world issue. Regional buyers will not feel confident in EVs if the nearest qualified technician is hours away. Councils, emergency services, towing operators, and repairers also need the skills to deal with damaged EVs safely. The hard truth is that strategy announcements are the easy part. Delivery is what matters. Australia needs chargers that are actually working in useful locations with reliable payment systems, good lighting, safe access, and enough bays to avoid queues. Businesses need practical depot charging support, not just headlines. Regional drivers need confidence that infrastructure keeps pace with vehicle sales. But this is still the right direction. EV policy cannot just be rebates for private buyers. Next phase is fleets, charging reliability, regional access, skills, and grid integration. That is exactly where New South Wales is now putting more attention. Alright, next up is Zeekr. This is a fresh follow-up story to a story we've already touched on with the Zeekr 8X, and the new development is that Zeekr is being much clearer about why plug-in hybrids and range extender style vehicles have become part of its Australian plan. Zeekr entered Australia as an electric brand, however the company is now preparing to bring large plug-in hybrid SUVs here as well, including the Zeekr 8X and the Zeekr 9X. The timing being discussed is late 2026 and early 2027. Zeekr Australia has indicated that one of the big SUVs could arrive at the end of this year and the other at the beginning of next year, although the final order has not been locked in. There is also the Zeekr 7 GT electric wagon in the mix, and that vehicle may even jump the queue. The big point is that Zeekr is not treating plug-in hybrids as a backward step. It is treating them as a way into large premium SUV segments where full battery electric vehicles can still be expensive, heavy, and limited by towing and long distance expectations. The Zeekr 8X and 9X are built on an EV-first architecture, and overseas reporting points to high voltage systems, large batteries, electric drive, and petrol engines used as part of the extended range or plug-in hybrid setup, depending on the version. For 8X, the overseas market information points to some serious numbers. Large battery packs, a 2-litre turbo petrol engine, dual and triple motor layouts, and outputs that can climb to supercar levels in flagship grades. The most extreme 8X variant has been reported with more than 1,000 kilowatts and a 0 to 100 km an hour time in under 3 seconds. That's insane for a large SUV, and frankly, it's not the part of the story that matters the most for us here in Australia. The more important part is this: Zeekr wants to target buyers who might otherwise look at a BMW X5, BMW X7, Mercedes-Benz GLE, Range Rover Sport, or a large luxury petrol SUV. Those buyers may like the idea of electric driving, but they may not want a full EV just as yet. They may tow, travel regionally, or simply want the flexibility of petrol backup. Zeekr is betting that a premium plug-in hybrid or range extender SUV gives them a bridge. There is a catch though. Plug-in hybrids no longer qualify for the federal fringe benefits tax exemption in Australia. That matters for novated lease buyers and fleets. A full EV can still have a major tax advantage in the right circumstances, but a PHEV does not get the same benefit. So Zeekr has to sell these vehicles on product strength, not tax treatment. The hard truth is that plug-in hybrids are only as good as how they are used. If owners charge them regularly and do most daily driving on electricity, they can make a lot of sense. If owners never plug them in and just carry a heavy battery around, they can be compromised petrol SUVs. For Australia though, this pivot makes sense. We are a big country. Large SUVs sell well, and a lot of buyers are still nervous about going fully electric for family touring. Zeekr is trying to meet the customers where they are, rather than forcing one drivetrain to answer onto every segment. It also shows something bigger. The Chinese brands are no longer just coming here with cheap EVs. They are now coming after premium SUVs, luxury buyers, performance buyers, and families who want flexibility. That should make the established premium brands just a little bit uncomfortable. Alright, next up, some good news for the MG IM5 and IM6 owners. MG's premium IM models launched in Australia last year, with the IM5 sedan and IM6 SUV positioned as higher tech, higher performance electric models above the regular MG range. Now MG is preparing updates for the IM5 and IM6, and importantly, it says existing owners are set to receive some of the new software features through over-the-air updates. That matters because one of the most frustrating things in modern EV world is buying a new car and then watching an updated version arrive 6 months later with better software. According to local reports, updated IM5 and IM6 models are expected in Australia in the second half of 2026 after a mid-cycle update in China. MG says most of the changes are software-based rather than major hardware changes, and it wants to avoid making recent buyers feel like they should have waited. The feature additions being discussed include expanded automated parking functions and increased smartphone control. MG has also indicated that the intention is not to charge owners for this upgrades. Although final details are still being evaluated, the rollout is expected to happen step by step. This is exactly the sort of thing legacy car companies and newer brands need to get right. If a car has the hardware already and the software can be improved, owners should benefit. That builds trust. It also makes a car feel newer for longer. The IM5 and IM6 are already very tech-heavy cars. At launch in Australia, the IM lineup started from around $60,990 drive away and ran into the low $80,000 range for the highest performance variants. The IM5 offers long range and performance variants, while the IM6 is the SUV body style. The global specification includes big screens, high-end driver assistance hardware, available air suspension and four-wheel steering, and very strong performance in all drive versions. Reality is that tech-heavy EVs need software polish. It's not enough to have a huge spec sheet. The menus need to make sense. Driver assistance needs to behave naturally on Australian roads. Phone integration needs to be reliable. Over-the-air updates need to actually arrive, not just be promised. So, this is a positive move from MG, however the execution will matter. If MG can deliver meaningful upgrades to existing IM5 and IM6 owners without charging them, that is a good signal. It says early adopters are not being left behind. And in the premium EV segment, where buyers are comparing MG's IM cars against Tesla, Polestar, Genesis, Zeekr and others, that kind of support can make a real difference. In keeping with MG, the updated MG4 has been detailed for Australia, and the headline is simple: lower prices. The updated MG4 EV range has been simplified, with the main updated variants now being the Essence 64 and the X-Power. The entry-level Urban remains available from $31,990 drive away, while the updated Essence 64 is priced at $39,990 drive away, and the updated X-Power is priced at $47,990 drive away. That is a $5,000 cut for the Essence and an $8,000 cut for the X-Power compared with the previous equivalent pricing. The Essence uses a 64 kWh LFP battery, rear-wheel drive, and produces 140 kilowatts, 350 Newton meters. WLTP range is listed at 452 kilometers. DC fast charging peaks at 154 kilowatts with a 10 to 80% charge in about 25 minutes. The X-Power uses a 64 kilowatt hour NMC battery, all-wheel drive, and produces 320 kilowatts and 600 Newton meters. WLTP range on that one is 405 kilometers with a 0 to 100 time of 3.8 seconds. That makes the X-Power one of the most absurd performance bargains in the Australian new car market, under 50 grand drive away for all-wheel drive and 3.8 seconds to 100 is still wild. The updated cabin gets a larger 12.8-inch touchscreen, a 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster, a new operating system, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and more physical switchgear. MG has also moved the gear selector to the center console. The last point is small, but it's important. A lot of car makers have gone way too far with touchscreens, burying basic functions in menus. Adding some physical controls back is a very good thing. Dimensions are familiar. The MG4 is 4,287mm long, 1,836mm wide, 1,516mm tall, sitting on a 2,705mm wheelbase. Boot space is 350 litres, expanding to 1,165 litres with the rear seats folded. Safety remains strong with a 5-star ANCAP rating based on 2022 Euro NCAP testing. The updated MG4 continues with a long list of active safety. There are some catches. The 51 kilowatt hour and 77 kilowatt hour battery options have been dropped from the updated range, so buyers have fewer choices. AC charging is still only 6.6 kilowatts on the Essence and X-Power. which is not amazing if you are using faster home or destination AC charging. However, the overall value equation is pretty hard to ignore. The MG4 was already one of the better driving affordable EVs in Australia, with a proper rear-wheel drive platform, decent efficiency and reasonably good packaging. Now the pricing is sharper, the interior tech has been improved, and the X-Power is even more of a performance outlier. The affordable EV fight in Australia is getting brutal, and MG clearly does not want to give ground to BYD, GWM or Leapmotor. For buyers, that can only be good news. Alright, on to Genesis, and they've finally given the GV60 a serious price reset. The updated 2027 Genesis GV60 is due in Australia from June, and the key headline is a new advanced rear-wheel drive variant priced from $88,300 plus on roads. That is around $15,000 cheaper than the previous entry point, and importantly, it brings the GV60 under the luxury car tax threshold. This is exactly the sort of move Genesis needed to make. The GV60 is a good car, but it was always a difficult sell at the previous pricing. Genesis is a premium brand, however in Australia it does not have the same badge pull as a BMW, a Mercedes-Benz or Audi, and it has been competing in a market where Tesla, Polestar, Volvo, Zeekr, BMW and Hyundai Group's own models are all fighting for attention. The new GV60 Advanced rear-wheel drive uses a single motor producing 168 kilowatts. It has an 84 kilowatt-hour battery and WLTP range of up to 561 kilometers. It remains built on Hyundai Motor Group's eGMP platform, which means 400 and 800 volt charging capability. On a suitable 350 kilowatt charger, Genesis claims a 10 to 80% charge in around 18 minutes. The updated GV60 also gets revised exterior styling, new lighting, a 27-inch connected car integrated cockpit display, improved battery conditioning, smart regenerative braking, expanded over-the-air update capability, revised suspension tuning, improved sound insulation and updated steering calibration. Equipment remains strong. Standard gear includes 19-inch wheels, leather-appointed seating, heated and ventilated front seats, surround view camera, smart parking assist, a broad active safety suite, a heat pump, vehicle-to-load capability, digital key 2.0 and Genesis connected services. The GV60 also retains its 5-star NCAP safety rating. The Performance Fost Magma version is still to come, effectively replacing the old Lux Performance grade. Final Australian pricing and specification for the GV60 Magma are still pending. The fact of the matter is that $88,300 plus on road costs is still not cheap. This is not suddenly an affordable EV, but it is a much more realistic starting point for the GV60. Genesis really had to respond to the market. Premium EV buyers now have far more choice than they did a few years ago. The old idea that every EV could carry a huge premium is fading quickly. This price cut is yet another sign that the Australian EV market is maturing. Overpriced EVs are being forced back to reality, and that is good for buyers, and it puts pressure on every brand that still thinks electric automatically means expensive. And our final story for today, BMW has built its 2-millionth fully electric vehicle. The milestone car was an i5 M60 xDrive produced at BMW's Dingolfing plant in Germany, and it was delivered to a customer in Spain. Now, 2 million EVs is not Tesla or BYD scale. Let's be honest about that. But for a traditional premium brand that has had to transition factories, platforms, supply chains, and customer expectations, it's a serious milestone. Dingolfing has become one of BMW's key electric production sites. The plant started EV production in 2021 with the iX and now builds models including the iX, i5 sedan, i5 Touring and the i7. BMW says more than 320,000 electric vehicles have been built at the factory, accounting for almost 1/6 of the BMW Group's total fully electric production. In 2025, more than a quarter of vehicles produced at the plant were fully electric. BMW also says at least one electric model is now produced at every German BMW Group plant. That matters because BMW is taking a flexible approach. Instead of building EV-only factories everywhere, it has been using plants that can build combustion, hybrid and electric vehicles depending on demand. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. A dedicated EV factory can be extremely efficient if demand is strong. However, flexible production can reduce risk if market demand shifts or if different regions adopt EVs at different speeds. For Australia, BMW's EV lineup is already broad by premium brand standards. We have seen electric models across small SUVs, large SUVs, sedans and performance variants. We have the iX1, 2, 4, 5 and 7 and iX all in play in different parts of the market. The bigger point is that premium brands are now deep into the transition. The early EV conversation was dominated by Tesla, then China changed the price and scale equation. Now the traditional premium brands are trying to prove they can electrify without losing what made people buy them in the first place. BMW's two-millionth EV does not mean the job is done. It does show that EVs are no longer a side project. For Australian buyers, that means more choice, more competition, and hopefully sharper pricing as the premium EV market keeps heating up. And that's Plugged In Australia for Monday, the 11th of May 2026. I think today's big theme is that the Australian EV market is getting more crowded, more complicated, and more competitive. That Firefly could bring another small EV option to the market. And Toyota is finally moving towards a fully electric Yaris. It's good to see the New South Wales government is putting support behind the infrastructure and skills that need EV adoption. As always, the details matter. The price, the warranty, servicing, real-world range, charging reliability, and long-term support are what separate a good headline from a good ownership experience. As always, thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, stay plugged in and stay charged. Ci vediamo.